everyone. If I told you that we could make the climate transition safer for at-risk communities, how many of you would want to do that? Great. We all know that climate change is going to cause heat waves and natural disasters, and that these impacts are going to impact our poorest communities the most. I have been working with communities like this for over 15 years, and I believe we can make the climate transition safer for at-risk communities. But first, let me tell you a little bit about myself and how I got into this and why I believe the carbon markets are a key tool to make the climate transition safer for at-risk communities. In 2006, I was working as a consultant to the UNDP on energy access for poor communities in Africa. And this was well before the carbon markets had gotten going. And at that time, the best solution we had for clean cooking was to train a poor woman to build her own improved cook stove out of mud. But in 2009, I was working on a carbon program in Mongolia, and we were able to work with micro-entrepreneurs who were innovating clean, efficient fuel furnaces for heating stoves. And then flash forward to today, to 2023, and we now have cook stove factories, large-scale production of efficient cook stoves in Asia and Africa. And what this enables is that micro-entrepreneurs like this one are able to deliver these cook stoves to the last mile to the poorest and most remote communities via bicycle. And all of this progress is due, I would say, 100% to the carbon markets. But the risks to communities are so much more than clean cooking. Climate change-induced heat waves in countries like India are expected to reach life-threatening levels in the near term, and the solutions are not there yet. We need to get ahead of these problems rather than responding to them when it's too late. I believe in looking at what has worked in the past and scaling that up. As a practitioner, I have analyzed 3 principles that work in the carbon markets and lead to success. I believe that following these 3 principles can help us address all of the climate-induced risks for at-risk communities. And when I look at these principles, I feel that we don't have to face our climate future with existential dread. Rather, I feel I need to pick up these tools and rally together with all of you sitting here and start to implement. The first principle is building lifelines to at-risk communities. My first experience working with an at-risk community was when I was 19 years old. That's me. I was a volunteer in El Salvador helping refugees during their civil war. And this community led a very tenuous existence. At any moment, a live war could descend on them. And just by living with them as an American and bearing witness to what they were going through, I created a lifeline. At MicroEnergy Credits, we provide a different type of lifeline. We connect households to affordable clean energy. When we work through local microfinance institutions that reach the most remote households across India, Mongolia, and Africa. Microfinance institutions work with their clients, typically meeting them twice a month. And so that means that MicroEnergy Credits, with our 8 million clients, creates 200 million monitoring touch points every year. This is 200 million potential lifelines. When monitoring, you learn things you don't expect. This woman had bought a water purifier through our program, and she was very satisfied with it, but her kidneys were already damaged from the poor water she had been drinking before. What happened next was important. A member of our monitoring team was able to connect her to a doctor at a good hospital. Connections like this can happen because monitoring is more than developing statistics. Monitoring can be a lifeline. As with MEC's model, great carbon projects have the potential to provide lifelines to communities that are otherwise left out. The second principle is empowerment. In the mid-90s, I moved to Bangladesh to help the Grameen Bank start a clean energy program for microfinance members. In every microfinance circle I sat in, I met women who felt safe. They were investing in their businesses and developing their livelihoods. Certainly, they had a lifeline through Grameen Bank, but more than that, it was the empowerment that made them safe. Indeed, prior to joining Grameen, many of these women were extremely oppressed. Some of them were not allowed to talk. They were not allowed to touch money. They were certainly not allowed to work outside the home. Without access to money, they weren't able to invest in their children's education. They weren't able to invest in their homes. And if their husband went off and spent the excess money at the beer hall, there was not really anything else they could do. And without savings, these women were doubly vulnerable because if their provider left or fell sick or even died, they really had no recourse. I started MicroEnergy Credits to help low-income households access clean energy because I knew that we could build on decades of experience in the microfinance sector to create a clean energy intervention that would empower women. Empowerment requires customer choice and autonomy. I took this click at a cook stove demonstration. At a demonstration like this, about 60% of the women in attendance would take a microloan for a cook stove. And then over the course of the year, after having watched their friends and neighbors use the cook stove successfully, another 20% would be likely to take that loan. Of these women, about 80% preferred the cook stove because without smoke, it led to healthier eyes and lungs. But also 85% of the women preferred the cook stove because it was quicker to cook, and that saved valuable time for these village women. Empowerment requires building up local leaders. At MicroEnergy Credits, our biggest budget line item, about 40% of our entire budget, is spent supporting clean energy demonstrators like this one pictured here. And other clean energy leaders include shopkeepers who are able to retail clean energy products locally, also like that one and like this one. It also includes women who, when they are able to repay their loan for the clean energy product by not buying fossil kerosene, they improve their credit score and increase their financial capacity. And they include restaurant owners who light up their restaurant with solar light. And they include early adopters who are able to use clean energy in their own home and then inspire others in their community to do so as well. Not all carbon projects today embrace the principle of empowerment. There are some projects out there that just buy a shipping container of efficient cook stoves and then find a village to give them away. There are decades of best practice that show that this empowers no one and it does not leave the local economic ecosystem intact to provide for after-sales service and for maintenance. In contrast, when I sit with circles of women like this, I am so honored that they are my clients. The relationship is completely different from a charity. If these women decide not to buy the cook stove or they choose not to use it after 6 months, our organization loses out. It's a relationship of mutual respect, and I love that I get to do this. This is the type of carbon business model that empowers the local stewards and keeps them in the driver's seat. The third principle is dynamism. The program's products and solutions need to be able to evolve quickly. I am reminded of this woman who was burned when her husband threw a kerosene lamp at her. Our solar lighting program got there too late to prevent this tragedy, but this reminds me of the imperative of moving quickly. Every moment that we don't waste is a life that we can save. As climate change-induced heat waves are already topping 122 degrees Fahrenheit, the fans are not going to be enough. The next step is air conditioning units for our poorest populations. But if we act proactively, we can ensure that these devices are the cleanest and most efficient possible while also saving lives. The solutions of yesterday are not the solutions of tomorrow. Indeed, wood and charcoal efficient stoves are a step on the clean cooking ladder, but the next step is electric cooking. And as the electric grid shifts to be powered by clean energy, we will be able to get the carbon emission from cooking down to nearly zero. When we do these things, creating lifelines, empowering leaders, working dynamically, we can create an infrastructure of resilience that makes our clean energy transition safer for all. Unfortunately, carbon credits have gotten a bad rap, and that is a crying shame because we need to take as much climate action now as possible, and carbon credits work. The situation reminds me of this mud field we had to transverse to complete our wind turbine installation in Bangladesh. There's no choice but to take off our shoes and just dive in. So let's do it. There are 3 main critiques of carbon credits. The first one is that some people say a carbon credit is a license to pollute. But let's be clear, the license to burn fossil fuels is given to us by our governments. And indeed, when companies lobby for fossil fuel subsidies, that is what sets our climate progress back. But when they buy carbon credits to take immediate climate action, that is bringing us forward. We need to demand that corporations do 3 things. First of all, not lobbying the governments for subsidies. Second of all, reducing their own carbon footprint. And third, buying carbon credits to support immediate climate action. Secondly, people fear that the way we calculate the volume of carbon emission reduction for cook stove projects or other project types is wrong. But we have methodologies today that have been developed over 2 decades by hundreds of scientists and experts. This is a reasonable estimate that we can work with today while we continue to improve the methodologies. The third critique comes from cook stoves projects where there was no maintenance done. The solution to carbon profiteering is to buy carbon credits from reputable program promoters. This requires asking a few simple questions. Does the company have a deep background in the development intervention they are working on? Is this just a giveaway program? What % of the products are in service according to their audited monitoring reports on the Carbon Standards website? This talk is about empowerment, and the person that I hope is empowered today is you. I hope that you all feel empowered to take on the obstacles that are facing the carbon markets and overcome them by supporting truly transformative carbon programs. We are doing this so that this coal does not need to be burned. And we are doing this so that these trees do not need to get burned down or cut down. People have often told me that the poor don't care about the environment, but you don't know that until you have the conversation. This is a conference of microfinance borrowers where microfinance leader Padma Reddy spoke to thousands of micro-entrepreneurs. And when she said, "We can all do our part to stop climate change," her words were received by thunderous applause. This is a picture of a gentleman in Mongolia who had tears in his eyes when he described to me his efficient furnace. In his words, we always wanted to do something about the pollution, about the air quality, but there had never been a single option that was affordable to families like ours. These people are the source of ideas and innovation for a climate transition that maximizes climate action we can take today and includes all of us working together. When I started MicroEnergy Credits, I initially thought we could fund it through philanthropy or governments, but we ended up financing it through the carbon markets. And 15 years later, I can say that I have seen peer programs come and go. My takeaway is that the carbon markets are truly a unique source of results-based finance, especially for at-risk communities, because they work. So much of our collective wealth is in corporate capital. If we can tap into that, we can unlock a truly transformative amount of funding, estimated between $50 and $250 billion, and between 7 and 13 gigatons of carbon emission reduction. This is funding that can close urgent gaps in our carbon budget while providing a lifeline to communities at greatest risk. We do this because it works. I believe it because I've seen it. Today, there are cook stove factories, and tomorrow, our at-risk communities can be safer. It's not just possible, it's happening, and we can do it if we come together. Thank you.